Hello everyone. The goal of this lesson today is going to be to learn how to create classes, objects, how to use constructors in classes to create objects, how to pass parameters to different classes and from one method to another method. And in order to do that, we're going to be using graphics in order to visualize the classes that we're creating. So the first thing that we want to do is to open up Visual Studio, and from the main screen of Visual Studio, click on Create a New Project. So we're going to select a Windows Forms app, and as you can see, I have my list filtered using C#, Windows, Desktop, and at the top of this list is the Windows Forms app .NET Framework template. So this is the one that we want to choose. So we're going to click on it and then click Next. And we're going to name our project Shapes. And then we're going to click Create. Okay, so now we have a blank Windows Forms app application with nothing on it. And the first thing that I always like to do is come in here and rename this default form. So I'm going to rename this form to Shapes. So you just type Shapes and press Enter, and there you go. Up here in the top of this form, we can still see that this says Form 1. So in order to fix that, I'm going to just click on the form, and you can see that I've clicked because of the sizing handles around the form. Also, over here at the top of the properties window, we can see the name of the form is Shapes, so we know that we've got that selected. So we scroll down and we look for the text property, and we rename the text property to Shapes, and then we press Enter. And now, as we can see, the border of our form says Shapes. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to build our form. So we need to go up here to the toolbox, and let's see, I'm going to filter this list. I'm going to go down to just common controls, and we need to add 5 text boxes, 5 labels, and a button to our form. So let's drag out text box 1, text box 2. So we will arrange these like so. Let's see, and actually this one we're going to size it like that. Doesn't have to be perfect for this demonstration. And that looks okay. So now this box is going to represent, let's see, length, width, height of the box that we're going to create, and then this will be the X position of the box, and this will be the Y position of the box. So we need some labels to identify each of these text boxes. So okay, so let's put this label up here like this, and we will go over to the text property of the label, and we will label it as length. Oops. There we go. And then for this one, we are going to make this width. And then, well, this is a little bit crowded here. There we go. Still a little crowded, but I'll fix it. And this is going to be height. And then, let's see, this is going to be, let's see, I called it box origin X. And let's see, this one is going to be box origin Y. Okay, so let's clean this up a little bit here. Let's see. I'll move all this together by selecting it all. We'll give ourselves a little bit of room here. There we go. And then I'll move these together. Move these down a little bit. There we go. And let's see, actually I think I'm going to increase the width of these a little bit, and then scoot this over and make this a little bit, well actually that doesn't need to be any wider, but there we go. Okay. Okay, that works. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to name our text boxes, because we are going to be referencing these text boxes by name in our code. And when I have the length text box selected right now, you can see that the name of the text box is just text box 1. And this is text box 2 and text box 3. So if we don't give these text boxes a easy to remember name to describe what they are used for in our program, we're going to have a hard time remembering that and or figuring out how to reference them in code. And if you have a large application with, you know, potentially 100 text boxes or more, it could be very frustrating to have to keep going back and trying to figure out how to reference them. So we will give these text boxes a name that is meaningful and will be easy to remember. So if you select a text box and go over to the properties window, we can change the name of the text box right here. So this is the length text box, so we're going to name it text length. This is the width text box, so we're going to name it text for text box width. And then this is the height text box, so we're going to name it text height. And this is box origin X, so we're going to name it text box underscore X. There we go. Underscore X. And this is the box origin Y, so we're going to name it txtbox underscore Y. Okay, now we've got our text boxes named. Okay, the next thing that we need on the form is we need a button. This is going to be a button that we will use when we click on it. Basically the values that we enter into these text boxes will be used by the program to draw a box. So right now this button has a name of button 1, and once again we want to give it a meaningful name because we're going to be referencing this button in code. So we will name it btn draw, just like that. And as you can see, the button itself, the text on the button says button 1 still, so we need to change that. So we're going to go to the text property and we're going to change it to draw. There we go. So now we have a button. Doesn't do anything yet, but we have a button on the form. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create the box class. So we need to open up the code behind this form. So you can either go over here to the form itself, right click on it, and click view code, or as you can see, you can also press F7 and that will open up the code behind the form. So right now we don't have much. This is just the default code that Visual Studio creates when you create a new Windows Forms application. And right now you can see that we have a namespace of shapes. A namespace is a way of organizing different classes together depending on the purpose of the class. We also have a class here that is called shapes, and this class extends from the form class. This is how we get the form that we can put controls on. And then we have a constructor, a default constructor called shapes. Right now it has one method in it, which is called initialize component. And when we load the form, this method runs automatically and it puts all the controls on our form. So we're going to create a box class, and we're going to do that inside the shapes namespace, but we don't want to be inside the shapes class. So we're going to move down here to where we are inside the namespace but not inside the shapes class, and we're going to just type class box. Oops, I messed that up. Okay, so now we have an empty box class, and I'm just going to paste all of the code in here right now, and then I'm going to explain the code to you as we go through this. So let me just grab this code and paste it. Okay, let's see if that looks right. Okay, so now we have a populated box class. The first thing that I want to point out is that, when I decided to do this tutorial, I'm not used to working with graphics and drawing objects in C#, so I had to figure out how to do this. So I did some searching on Google, and I found this website right here, and I obtained most of this code from this website, and I changed it a little bit. I renamed some of the variables and changed a couple of other things, but I did not originate this code, so I just want to point that out. Okay, so the first thing that I want to point out here is that this box takes the following parameters. It takes a height, a width, a length, an origin X, and an origin Y. And we're going to get those values from the text boxes that when we run the application, the user is going to type in some values into these text boxes, and those values are going to be eventually passed into this box class, and this is called the constructor. They're going to be passed into the constructor of the box class, and we are going to assign the values that we pass into the constructor to these variables, these m underscore I height, I width, I length, I origin X, and I origin Y. These are class member variables because they are defined directly inside the box class. So since they are defined directly inside the class, these variables are called member variables. That's where we get the M from, to identify them as member variables. And the I is for integer, because these variables are defined as integers, or declared as integers, I should say. And so they are available to the entire class. So when we assign them here, we could check the value here and it would be the same value as what was passed in. Also, these variables are used down here. So here's the origin X, origin Y, here's the width and the height. So these values are exactly the same as these, or these variables I should say are exactly the same as these and are exactly the same as these. So I will explain more about the box class as we get in and start actually debugging this code and stepping through it. It'll be a lot easier for you to see what's going on. And I'm going to explain how the box is actually constructed and how the values are passed around and all that. So I needed to create the box class because now I'm going to have to reference it from the shapes class. So I'm going to, the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create a list. A list is in C# similar to an array, if you've ever worked with arrays before. But in C# I think lists are much easier to work with, and the list represents a list of a specific type or a specific class. So we're going to create the list, and I'm just going to copy this again. The list is going to have to be available to the entire class. So we're going to create the list at the class level of the shapes class. And so the list is a list of box type objects, and we're going to name the list m_myboxes. And basically this list is going to, like I said, it's going to hold a list of boxes. So initially when we declare the list like this, it is null. The m_myboxes has not been initialized. So we need to initialize it, and we're going to do that inside the load method of the form, so that when the form loads, that list is initialized and it will become empty. So what we need to do is we need to click on the design tab so that we can go back to the form, and we need to make sure that the form is selected. And as you can see, I have the sizing handles all the way around the form, and over here in the properties window you can see that I have the form selected right here. So we're going to go into the load event. So we need to select the lightning bolt icon, and this is a list of all the events that are available for this form. And down here, automatically selected is the load event. So in order to create an empty load event, all we have to do is just double click on it, and then we're instantly taken to the code, and we can see that we now have an empty method. So any code that's inside this method will automatically run when the form is loaded. And what we want to happen when the form is loaded is for this list of boxes to be initialized. We initialize the list by using the new keyword. So we can type m, and right away my boxes shows up, and we just type equals new, and then list box shows up by IntelliSense, and we can just press tab right here, and that will be written into our code. And then, whoops, did not mean to do that. And there we go. So now, do this. So I'm going to set a breakpoint right here just to demonstrate this. So in order to set the breakpoint, you click inside the margin where you want the breakpoint to be set. I'm going to set it right here, so that when I run this program, the code is going to stop right here on this breakpoint, and my boxes is not going to be initialized. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to click start. Okay, so now this means that the form has loaded and we are stopped right here, and my boxes has not been initialized. So if I hover my mouse over m underscore my boxes, you can see that it's null. And same thing up here. If you hover your mouse over m underscore my boxes, it is null. If we press F10 or F11 on your keyboard, you can step through the code, and we press it one time and now we are stopped on my boxes initializer. This yellow arrow represents the next line of code that is going to be executed when we step again, but this code has not executed yet. So if we press F10 one more time, now we've executed that line of code, and if we hover our mouse over, we can see that the m underscore my boxes is no longer null. It is actually a list of boxes, and it has a count of 0. So there are 0 boxes in this list because we haven't loaded any into this list yet. So now you can go ahead and stop the program, and we'll move on to the next step. One thing I want to point out before we move on is I want to talk a little bit about scope. So this comment here says m underscore my boxes is now an empty usable list that can be used everywhere in the class. If it were declared in this method, it could only be used in this method. For example, if we write list box m underscore my boxes followed by the initializer inside this method, then m underscore my boxes would only be usable inside this method. Another way of writing this is to write list box my boxes equals new list my box. So you're declaring it and initializing it all in the same line. Again, m underscore my boxes would only be accessible inside this method. So there would be no reason to have this up here. But doing it the way I've done it, since it's declared at the class level, it is accessible to the entire class. So that's why this right now is the same as this right here. And if we were to use m underscore my boxes inside any other methods, it would still be the same m underscore my boxes. Okay, now we're going to add some code that is going to allow us to actually create some boxes. There we go. Okay, so we've got this new method here called create new box. And so basically what this is going to do, this method is going to be executed whenever we click the draw button. We haven't put the code in there to do that yet. We will do that in a minute. We'll create a click event for the draw button that will call this method. But what this is going to do is it's going to get the text from the text boxes. Remember I said we were going to reference the text boxes in code. So we have the text property, which is a string of the text box. So this text property is going to represent whatever the user types in the text boxes for each of these text boxes. And we're going to try to parse that text. This is what the triparse method is of the int type, primitive type. The int primitive type has its own triparse method that tries to parse out this text and convert it into an integer. So this would mean like if a user wanted to type something in those text boxes that was not an integer, basically then we don't want this code down here to run. So if the user types integers into all the text boxes, these triparse methods are going to return Boolean as indicated by the IntelliSense here. They're going to return a Boolean value, which is a true or false value. True means that it successfully converted the text that the user typed in the text box into an integer. False means that it was not able to convert the text into an integer. So if it is able to convert the text into an integer, then that variable gets output from the triparse method into these variables here, which are I-length, I-width, I-height, I-origin x, and I-origin y. If any one of these triparse methods returns false, then this expression inside this if block will return false, and it will not execute the code that's inside this if block. So once, assuming that the user typed integer values in all of the text boxes, and we now have the integer values assigned to these variables here, these variables are going to get used down here to create a new box object. So notice that inside the box object parentheses, I've provided arguments. That's what these are. These are arguments to the box class. So they get these variables when we initialize the new box, will get passed to the constructor of the box class, which is down here. So down here, notice we're inside the box class, and here's the constructor right here. This constructor accepts these arguments, and it is a coincidence that I happen to name these exactly the same all the way down. They don't have to be named the same. I could have named this anything down here. What matters is that the order of these parameters are the same as the order of these arguments. So here we have a height variable is the first argument, and the first parameter here is height. We have width, the second one is width, then length and length, origin x, origin x, origin y, origin y. And notice also that these are all of the same type. So these are all integers, and these are all integers. So these integer values from the text boxes are going to get passed to the constructor. And then inside the constructor, these member variables, these class member variables, m_i_height, are going to be assigned to the value that was passed in from this box initializer. And then m_my_height is going to have the value of this I-height and this I-height. And it's going to be used down here in this draw method. So that's the goal. So these variables here that are in the constructor parameters only have scope within the constructor itself. So if I were to try to access I-height down here in the draw method, it wouldn't be able to find it. So we have to assign it to something that has scope inside the entire class, which are these variables here. That's why we're doing these assignments right here. Okay, so once we construct a new box object, then we're going to call it box with a lowercase b. Case is very important in C#. The capital B lowercase ox represents the box class, and I've decided to call the box object just lowercase box. So this box is going to have these values once the execution gets down to this line, and we're going to add this box object to our list of boxes, which we declared up here and initialized here. See, m_my_boxes is available to the entire class. So hopefully that made sense. Once I execute this and start stepping through the code, um, I think you'll get it. Okay, now we need to enable the click event for the draw button so that we can actually call this code and step through it and inspect the values. So in order to create a click event for a button, you can either double click on the button in the form design view, or you can simply select the button, go over to the properties window, make sure that you have the lightning bolt button selected here, go to the click row in the properties window, and then just double click, and then an empty click event will be created for you in the code. So as I've pointed out in this comment, all the code that's inside this method will execute when the click event is fired by clicking on the button. So right now what's going to happen is create new box will be called. So if we were to set a breakpoint right here and then run our program, let's see, I should disable this breakpoint by clicking on it and then click continue. Okay, so let's put some values in here. Let's see, I'm going to put 50, 50, 50, and then for the box origin I'm going to put 100 and 100, and then we're going to click the draw button. Okay, so now I clicked the draw button and my code has paused at my breakpoint inside the button draw click event. So we want to step into the create new box method. So to do that, we're going to press F11 on our keyboard, and now we are inside the create new box. So right away we can see that these variables, these integer variables, have been declared but nothing's been assigned to them yet, and they all have a default value of 0. We can also come down here to the text properties of these text boxes, and we can see the values that we typed in the text box. So right now these values, as you can see here, they're surrounded by double quotes. This is because these are text, they're strings. We need to convert them to integers, which we'll do with the triparse method. So these are the values that we typed in the text box. And again, I length is 0, I width is 0, I height is 0, origin X and origin Y are 0. So we're going to press F11 on our keyboard, and we're going to step down into this big if statement here, and we're going to click or press F11 again. When we do that, the triparse method will run, and if all of the triparse methods return true, meaning that they were able to convert these text values into integers, then we will end up down here inside the if block, which is between these braces here. So we're going to press F11 now. Okay, so it was able to successfully convert all of our text values into integers, and now these integer variables have integer values, and you can see that they don't have quotation marks around them. These are actual number values. Okay, so same thing down here, these are all integer values, and we're going to press F11 and we will go step into this, and we will wind up in the constructor down here. Oh, you can see that these already have the values even though we haven't gone into it yet. That's interesting. Okay, well, we're going to step, and again, these already have the values that we passed into it. You can see why order would be important. It just so happens that I put 50s for the height, width, and length for all of these, but if I didn't, and I put these in the wrong order, then my height, width, and length would not be what I intended. Okay, so we're going to step into this. So right now, m underscore height has a value of 0 still because we haven't assigned a value to it. Again, this yellow arrow means that this is the next line of code that will execute when I press F11, but it hasn't executed yet. So right now, m underscore height has a value of 0, and I underscore height has a value of 50. So when I press F11, now m underscore height has a value of 50. And if I go up here to the class level where I declared the variable, it has a value of 50. And down in this draw method, let's see, where is m underscore height? Oh, there it is. M underscore height in the draw method also has a value of 50. Okay, so that means, or that proves rather, that m underscore height is a class member variable and it can be used anywhere inside the class. Okay. So we're going to assign the rest of these. So now these all have their values. So when we press F11, we're going to finish, we're going to exit the constructor, and we're going to go back to our main form class and press F11 again, and now box has a value where before it was null. And if we open this up, we can see that box has all of these properties. And that's all that's going to happen right now because we haven't added any code to do anything with this yet. So that will be coming up next. And we're going to exit out, and as you can see, nothing happened. So we're going to go ahead and close this, and then we'll move on to the next step. Actually, the next thing I want to show you is what will happen when when the list has two boxes in it. So I'm going to set a breakpoint right here, and I'm going to disable this breakpoint here, and we'll start the application. So let's say move it over here so you can see it, and I'm going to put some values in here. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so there we go. So now we've already gone through and created the box class. We've gone through the box constructor, and now m underscore my boxes has one box in it, and you can see here that it has a count of 1. And if we open this up, we can see that this represents a box, and in the list it has index position 0. So now let's continue, and we will put in some different values here. Whatever, 75. We'll leave that at 50. We'll make this 150 and 200. Whatever. Oops, 200. And click the draw button again. Now, once again, we've come back through this code. We've created a new box. Right here, here's our values. And m underscore my boxes now has 2 boxes in it. You can see the count is 2, and if we open this up, we can see that our box at index position 0 still has our original values that we gave it, and the box at index position 1 has the other values that we gave it. So we have 2 distinct boxes in our list, and the next step is to learn how to actually draw those on the form so that we can visualize this a little easier. So we'll continue, we'll close our form, and we'll continue on with the next step. Okay, so the next step is that we are going to draw the boxes on the form, and we're going to do that from within the form paint event. The form paint event is when all of the controls and anything really gets actually drawn on the form. So we're going to go back over to the Form Design View tab. We're going to select the actual form, and again, notice the sizing handles around the form when it's selected, and you can see that we have a System Windows form selected in our Properties window. And we're going to go down to the Paint event of the form, and we're going to double click, and this will create an empty Paint event handler method in our code. And what we want to do is we want to call a method that we haven't created yet called drawbox. So I'm just going to copy this code and paste it in. Okay, and we only want to draw a box if the box has at least one box, or the box list, m underscore my boxes, has at least one box in it. So we're going to put an if statement here that says if the count of boxes in the list is greater than 0, then execute this method that we haven't created yet called drawbox. And we're going to pass, and notice that I have this underlined red right here. That's because drawbox does not exist yet. So we're going to pass paint event arguments, which are called E by default, into the drawbox method. E is going to contain the drawing surface that will be used to draw the boxes onto the form. So we're going to go down a little bit here, and we're going to create our method called drawbox right here. And now you can see that this is no longer underlined in red. And E is of type paint event arguments, and so in drawbox we're going to catch paint event arguments, and we're also going to call it E, but we could call it anything we want. I just chose to call it E. And so the E, which belongs to the form, will be passed into this method, and what we're going to do is we're going to iterate over our box list. So this is the list of boxes, and it contains a list of type box, which is the class. And as we iterate over each box in the list, we're going to refer to each box that's in the list as my box. And then from my box, we're going to call, which my box is a class box, as you can see when I hover my mouse over this in this little tooltip. That is a box class, and the box class has a public method called draw, which is right here, as you can see. And this now has one reference. And let's see, here we are. And we're going to call this public method called draw, and we're going to pass to this method E, which is from here, dot graphics. And in this public method, this public draw method, you can see that we're catching an object of type graphics. We're naming it graphics, and it's used in this method. So this graphics object represents the drawing surface of the form, and so anything that we do on the drawing surface of the form is going to show up on the form. So when we draw a rectangle on the form, we do that on the drawing surface here, and it shows up on the form, and then we draw each of these lines on the drawing surface, and it shows up on the form as well. And then we get our box. So I think I'm going to set a breakpoint right here. I'm going to remove this breakpoint up here. So whenever my boxes has a count greater than 0, means we've created a box. We're going to call the drawbox method. It's going to come down here, and we're going to see what happens. Okay, so let's start this. Okay, so let's just put in some values here. We'll say 50, 50, 50, and we'll do 150, 100. And we're going to click draw. Okay, so now we can see here my boxes has a count of 1, and there's the values that we submitted. So we're iterating over my boxes, which is a list. We're for eaching over each of the boxes in the list, and my box has the value of the first box in the my boxes list. So now we're going to call the draw method, and we're going to pass the graphics object, which is again is the drawing surface of the form. You can think of it that way to make it easier. So when we press F11 here, that means that we want to step into the draw method. So we're going to press F11, and now we are inside of the box class. And if we look, all of these values are present now inside the box class. Okay, so we're going to step through this, and I should have done this earlier, but I'm going to just give me a second here to reconfigure my screen so that you can see. Okay, here's the, oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, I can't move the form, but at least you should be able to see it now. So let me get rid of this. We don't really need it. So I'm going to step down through the code here, and so now we're on this line of code that says draw rectangle. So we're going to execute this line of code, and as you can see, there is no rectangle to be seen, and I will explain why that happened. Now we're going to draw lines, and we're not seeing anything happen on the form. And now we have no more boxes in our list, and I'm just going to let this run. Disable this breakpoint by clicking here, and there you go. We have a form that doesn't have any boxes on it. So the reason for that, I'm going to go ahead and stop it. We need to add one more line of code to our click event right here, which is this dot refresh. What that means is refresh the form and once we refresh the form after we create a new box, you will be able to see the rectangles or the boxes get drawn on the form. So now that we've added this line of code, let's go ahead and do this one more time. I'm going to go ahead and re-enable my breakpoint. There we go. We're going to start this up one more time, and we're going to move this back over here. Okay, so now let's put in some values again. 50, 60, 70, 150, 100. Okay, now we're going to click draw one more time. So we're inside the drawbox method, and you can see the values. So we're going to go step into the draw method one more time, and now we're going to execute Okay, well, we've created a rectangle. Now we're going to execute the draw rectangle method of the graphics object. There you go. Now you can see that we have a rectangle on our form. The difference is that we did this dot refresh. So now we're going to draw each line of the box. So one at a time, we're going to press F11, and there's the, looks like the top left line of the box. Now we're going to execute the next draw line. There's the top back part of the box. We're just going to keep going, step down, and there you go. There's our completed box. So now we're going to go back out of the box class. We don't have any more boxes in our list, and we're just going to let this go. Still wants to execute this paint event, so I'm going to disable the breakpoint, and I'm going to continue, and now we're done drawing, and we can do things. Whoops, where did my Visual Studio go? We can do things with our box. So now let's create another box. Let's just give it some different values. We're going to give it 80, 20, 100, and we're going to put it at, say, 300 for the X position, and we're going to leave the Y the same, and we're going to draw another box. Oops, I forgot to re-enable my breakpoint, but the same thing would have happened here. I'll go ahead and re-enable the breakpoint, and you can see that we have two boxes on our form. Oh yeah, we are stopped again. So I'm going to disable the breakpoint, let it continue. Okay, now we can create another box. This time we'll make a very small box, 40, 20, 10, and we're going to go to the 350, whoops, 350X position. And this time we'll re-enable the breakpoint. We'll draw, oops. Yeah, this paint method is very finicky. Okay, oops, keeps hitting it. Well, I don't think we're going to be able to show you this, because anything that you do on these forms inside the paint method, it just makes it almost impossible. So I think I'm just going to delete this breakpoint. One thing I can show you though, actually no, I'm not going to delete it. I want to show you that there's two boxes in the My Box list now. So the first one has the values of the first box, and that's at index position 0. The second box is index position 1, but there's our values for the second box. So now let's see, we'll just let this continue, and then draw the third box. Wow, that's a good place for it. And then I'm just gonna reset my breakpoint here, and I'm gonna click the draw. Jeez. I don't know if that did it or not. Let's see. Yep, now I have 3 boxes in my list. So you can see that the list just keeps growing, and there's the values of the third box. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully you got something out of this video. Please leave a comment below to let me know what you liked or didn't like. Thank you.